Senator Gravel, you served in the military during the Korean War. Have you had any experiences with the Veterans Affairs Department as a veteran yourself?
Very good. I get my meds from the VA, so I know the situation quite well.
So you're satisfied or unsatisfied?
I'm satisfied, very much so, and I think they do a good job. But I think it's really somewhat appalling because the government has always waged war against the veterans. And I would suggest that Senator Obama, who's on the committee, did they do any oversight work to find out before they read in the Washington Post that there was a scandal up the street at Walter Reed? Right. I mean, what about that? Did they all get informed of that, or did you know it before?
Actually, we have done a lot of oversight, trying to consistently force this administration to put money into the system that it has refused.
Well,
let me finish, Mike. The first year that I was on the VA, myself, Senator Patty Murray, Senator Rockefeller, and others tried to tell the administration, you need an additional $2 billion in order to provide services to troops who are coming home. The administration said, no, you don't need it. We don't need it. Everything's covered. 6 months through, they had to come back and say, you know what, it turns out we did need it after all. And part of the reason is because they have been trying to keep the cost down of this war and have not fully factored in the sacred obligation that I think we have to make sure that every single veteran has the services that they need.
Well, the question he asked specifically was, did you know about the problems at Walter Reed before you read about them in the Washington Post?
And I've visited Walter Reed repeatedly. Typically what would happen is we would go to visit troops in the medical facility. And people will acknowledge that the medical facility at Walter Reed does great work. Unfortunately, what it turned out was the outpatient facilities were disastrous, and that's why we now have legislation moving forward to make sure not only that we're just painting over some of the mold that was in there, but we're also making it easier for families and veterans to negotiate the system once they're outpatient.
All right, let's go back to Jennifer for another question.
Well, thank you. Polly Kern is here with us tonight. Hi, Polly. You live in Hancock, New Hampshire. You are a retired legal secretary. You have a question about Iran tonight. You lived there in the late 60s.
Yes, that's particularly the reason why I have the question about Iran. I'd like to ask, how would you approach solving the problem we have with Iran today? Would you use force or would you use diplomacy? And if you use diplomacy, what would you do?
All right, let's let Senator Clinton first respond to that.
Well, I am very concerned about Iran, and I believe that we should have been using diplomacy for a number of years now. I am, I guess, pleased that the administration is starting to talk to the Iranians, but it is way overdue. We have allowed the Iranians to begin their nuclear program, to imprison Iranian Americans as they are now, to send weapons across their borders to be used against our young men and women. And we need a process of engagement. You know, the president's policy has been we don't talk in this administration to people we don't agree with or that we think are bad. All during the Cold War, we always talked to the Soviet Union. They had missiles pointed at us. They had leaders who said they would bury us. They waged wars around the world. We never stopped talking. In my administration, diplomacy, patient, careful diplomacy, the kind of diplomacy that Bill Richardson did for my husband, that really gets people to stay with it over time. Are you always going to get good results? No, but you've got to start the process. However, we still have to make it clear that Iran having a nuclear weapon is absolutely unacceptable. We have to try to prevent that at all costs, but we need to start with diplomacy in order to see what we can accomplish.
So what happens, Senator, if diplomacy, when all is said and done, fails?
Well, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals because we've had an administration that doesn't believe in diplomacy. You know, they have every so often Condi Rice go around the world and show up somewhere and make a speech, and occasionally they even send Dick Cheney. That's hardly diplomatic in my view. So from what I would say, we won't know until we get a president who is committed to diplomacy and will do things like use the great diplomats that have come up through our country, use former presidents, use people like Bill Richardson. Only then will we be able to make a clear assessment. I just hope we have enough time because unfortunately we have many months to go before this administration is done.
Senator Edwards, how far would you go, if necessary, to stop Iran from building a nuclear bomb?
Well, can I be more specific? I think that beyond just talking about diplomacy, if you lived in Iran, you know that the Iranian people actually rallied for America on the streets of Tehran after September the 11th. And there's a long history of pro-American sentiment in Iran. There is an extraordinary opportunity available to us on Iran, and there's a very clear path from my perspective. They have a president who's politically unpopular. The people are in a different place. He hasn't done what he promised to do, Ahmadinejad, when he was elected president. We don't have economic leverage over the Iranians, but the Europeans do, the European banking system does. We should put two options on the table. One, carrots. We'll make the nuclear fuel available to you, the international community, but we'll control it. You can't nuclearize, you can't weaponize it. Second, we're going to put a clear set of economic incentives on the table. And the Iranian people need to hear this. It needs to be not behind closed doors, just 10 more seconds. And then the alternative, the stick, is if they don't do that, there are going to be serious economic sanctions. We need to drive a wedge between the Iranian people and this radical leader.
But you're saying